In the dead of night, long after the palace lights dimmed and the world assumed peace behind the gilded gates, a covert order was whispered directly from Prince William himself. Insiders now allege this wasn't just a decision, it was a command. "I won't tolerate this," he reportedly said, triggering a midnight shift of power that stunned even senior royals. But what was so urgent? And who stood in the way? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What followed those words was not ceremony. It was not protocol. It was movement. Quiet, fast, and deliberate. According to multiple palace insiders, phones lit up across Kensington Palace as a classified directive began to circulate through a sealed internal channel, one reserved only for matters of state emergency. Staff members who had served the family for decades later described the atmosphere as electric with fear, as if something long buried had finally forced its way to the surface. Security patterns shifted without explanation. Corridors that were usually silent at that hour echoed with hurried footsteps. And in the East Wing, doors that were never opened after dusk were suddenly unlocked. No announcement was made, no formal notice issued, yet something unmistakable was happening. Confidential materials described by one shaken aide as not meant to be handled outside the king's private authority were reportedly removed from restricted archives and rerouted under armed escort. Names were checked. Clearances revalidated. Even senior household officials were allegedly denied access, told only that the order came directly from the prince. It was in that moment the alleged phrase began circulating among staff in hushed fragments. "I won't tolerate this." Not a request, not a warning, a line in the sand. Those stationed near the private offices of the Queen Consort later claimed they witnessed a scene that has never appeared in any court circular. Camilla's long-serving private secretary, a figure known for moving freely through the highest levels of palace administration, was escorted from the grounds after midnight. No explanation, no farewell, just a firm instruction and a waiting vehicle. To those who saw it, the message was unmistakable. This was not reorganization, it felt like removal, and as words spread, fear followed. Was this about loyalty? About documents? Or about something far more dangerous that had been festering behind palace walls? Within hours, whispers grew darker. The midnight transfer, insiders say, did not merely involve personnel or routine files. It allegedly centered on a sealed collection of documents once reserved for the monarch alone, materials labeled King's Eyes Only. And astonishingly, the destination named in the order was not King Charles. It was Princess Anne. The implication hit like a shockwave. Why her? Why now? And why in secret? Some staff reportedly broke down in private offices, aware they were witnessing a rupture in royal order they might never see healed. Others began quietly aligning themselves, understanding instinctively that power inside the palace had just tilted. Whatever William had seen, whatever he had learned, had pushed him past restraint, past diplomacy, past silence. And in doing so, he had opened a door that could never be fully closed again. But while the corridors trembled with whispers and Queen Camilla's allies reeled in disbelief, Princess Anne remained eerily silent until now. As panic seeped through the royal ranks, Princess Anne met the swirling storm with quiet defiance. But what exactly had she been preparing for, and how deep did her knowledge run before the midnight order came down? The palace was still reeling from the shock of Prince William's midnight directive when word reached Princess Anne. But unlike others who scrambled for clarity, she remained unflinching. Those closest to her described a calm so unnerving, it unsettled even the most seasoned aides. One witness swears that as the courier delivered the secured documents to her private estate, Anne didn't flinch. She simply nodded, almost as if the moment had arrived precisely as she had foreseen. For months, perhaps longer, Anne had watched the subtle cracks form beneath the crown's surface. And now, with the tremors erupting into full-blown quake, she was already standing exactly where she needed to be. Behind closed doors, her staff discovered a leather-bound dossier bearing the royal seal and stamped with the phrase, "Monarch, contingency. Its contents remain confidential, but sources describe its pages as outlining alternative leadership scenarios in times of compromised influence. The mere existence of such a file implies that Anne had not only anticipated disruption, but had been quietly positioning herself for months. Some claim she and William had exchanged encrypted communications, away from the royal communication channels, discussing the growing unease surrounding Camilla's unchecked influence and the weakening of Charles's authority. These were not idle complaints. These were strategic exchanges, calculated, guarded, and precise. Those inside Anne's household later confessed they had been operating under a shadow directive of their own. A crisis team, discreetly assembled and rigorously prepared, was already in place well before the midnight order was triggered. Legal advisors, retired intelligence liaisons, and senior protocol officers had been brought in under temporary consultancy roles, working in silence under Anne's instruction. She had not declared a challenge to the throne, but she had certainly prepared for one. Insiders now whisper of a fundamental divide in the royal command structure. While the public still saw a united monarchy, internally, loyalties were being tested. Princess Anne's silent confidence exposed a far deeper schism than previously imagined. One that went beyond protocol and duty. It was a matter of survival. Her stoicism wasn't just habit, it was calculated. It was controlled. And it hinted at something long held inside. Anne, by all accounts, had come to believe that someone needed to step forward, not to seize the throne, but to protect what it once stood for. She may not have uttered a declaration, but the message was received loud and clear. She was not shocked by the chaos. She was not disrupted by the shift. She was ready, armed with documents, direction, and a legacy to defend. She wasn't acting in rebellion, she was acting in preservation. And perhaps she knew all along that this storm would come. If Anne had long foreseen this, what had truly ignited William's rage, and who was the unseen hand challenging his legacy from within? Palace corridors buzzed with uneasy silence until one explosive whisper broke through. Camilla had crossed a line. Sources say the Queen Consort pushed a private initiative that blindsided both William and Anne. Was this the final betrayal that shattered the royal balance? The tremors began with a leak, a single sheet of paper, unsigned and unacknowledged, but undeniably real. It bore the traces of internal routing, meant for a select few eyes within the Crown Trust, but someone had seen enough to speak. The document allegedly outlined a quiet restructuring of ceremonial roles, with subtle insertions that elevated members of Camilla's own family to positions traditionally safeguarded for bloodline royals. It was a maneuver cloaked in administrative jargon but devastating in its implications. For Prince William, it was not just overreach, it was invasion. The fury came quickly. According to a senior aide present that day, William confronted Camilla behind closed doors, his voice rising as the meeting wore on. No one knows precisely what was said, but when the doors reopened, the air was thick with frost. He did not offer her his hand. She did not offer him her eyes. And from that moment on, the palace itself seemed to divide, room by room, heart by heart. Princess Anne, who had been left entirely out of the loop, learned of the memo not through royal briefings, but from a third-party aide who stumbled across it in confusion. Her reaction was not loud, but her fury was sharp, chilling. Those close to her say it wasn't the power play that upset her. It was the deceit. She had stood by her brother. She had accepted Camilla's presence for the sake of stability. But now, that quiet tolerance had turned to betrayal, and the damage was irreversible. As the rift deepened, insiders described a growing sense of chaos. A strategic dinner, meant to solidify the year's public calendar, devolved into open argument. Tempers flared. Words were exchanged that could not be unsaid, and within 48 hours, 2 royal aides long considered loyal to Charles resigned without public explanation. The palace spun the exits as routine. Those on the inside knew better. Perhaps the most damning revelation, however, came from within the king's own advisory circle. One insider described Charles as paralyzed. He reportedly refused to take a firm position, avoiding direct comment, even as documents circulated and alliances shifted. In a private conversation, he allegedly muttered, "We've survived worse." But those words fell flat. This wasn't a storm coming from outside. This was a collapse from within. As Camilla pressed forward, William's patience finally snapped. There was no space for negotiation, no more warnings, no more diplomacy. And with Anne now aware and incensed, the siblings moved as one unyielding, united, and unforgiving. The Midnight Order wasn't born in a single moment. It had been building, pushed forward by silence, deception, and ambition. But if Camilla's maneuver was the match, then William's Midnight Order was the fire, and the flames would soon reach the king himself. For King Charles, the weight of the crown has never felt heavier. Faced with insubordination from his son, silence from his sister, and unrest within the palace, he reportedly sat alone at the Windsor Council table. According to aides, Princess Anne's words cut the deepest: "You're losing control." The morning after William's midnight directive, Charles summoned a closed-door emergency meeting at Windsor, a rare move, signaling just how serious the crisis had become. But the room he entered wasn't loyal, and it certainly wasn't united. Gone was the obedient circle that once surrounded him. In its place stood a cold reckoning. Anne arrived before everyone, posture rigid, eyes unwavering. The tension thickened the moment their eyes met. She didn't wait for ceremony. She cut through silence with the brutal clarity of a woman fed up with shadows. "This would have never happened under Mother," she reportedly said. "You're letting it all slip. No flattery. No veil, just truth, sharp and merciless." Charles, visibly shaken, attempted to defend himself, citing pressures, complexities, and the burden of modern monarchy, but none of it landed. Because in that room, it was no longer about diplomacy, it was about damage, and Camilla's absence from the council table made it worse. She wasn't just missing, she was retreating. Some took it as guilt, others as avoidance, but it sent a dangerous message to the room. She wouldn't face the fallout. And so, as Charles tried to assert his authority, his silence on Camilla's role only hardened the hearts of those present. They had come for answers, and all he offered was hesitation. In a desperate attempt to reassert control, Charles allegedly proposed amending or delaying parts of William's directive. But not a single senior courtier backed the motion. Instead, they exchanged looks with Anne, whose quiet strength had become their compass. One lord reportedly said, "The Queen would have known what to do." Another muttered, "The Prince already has." Slowly, painfully, the realization settled over Charles like a fog. He was no longer leading, he was reacting. What followed was perhaps the most revealing act of all. As the others departed, aides noted that Charles remained seated, hands clasped tightly, staring into the middle distance. Hours later, a palace steward disclosed that he was found alone in the private chapel, still dressed in council attire, eyes red, lips trembling as if caught in silent prayer. He had spoken of continuity. He had clung to legacy, but the truth had finally cornered him. The kingdom wasn't fracturing because of outside forces, it was splintering because of what he had allowed within. As the king struggled to regain his footing, the real battle moved into the shadows, where a vault of royal secrets waited to change everything. Behind a sealed chamber at Windsor Castle lies a vault known only to a few. Insiders now claim Princess Anne was granted unprecedented access, unlocking decades of Queen Elizabeth's personal correspondence. What she found may have rewritten everything she believed about the monarchy and her place within it. For years, Vault B was spoken of only in the vaguest terms, an archive of the monarch's private thoughts, strategic outlines, and letters never meant to see the light of day. But in the aftermath of William's midnight directive, something shifted. The doors to that sacred vault, previously reserved only for the reigning sovereign, were opened for one person alone, Princess Anne. It was not a ceremonial visit, it was a passing of silent authority. The keys did not come with a speech. They came with the weight of an unspoken inheritance. Sources suggest what Anne found inside stunned even her. Among the meticulously catalogued files were personal letters penned by Queen Elizabeth II, intimate, calculated, and hauntingly prescient. In one document marked for emergency access, the late Queen reportedly referenced both Anne and William as potential guardians of royal continuity, should the throne ever face internal compromise. Another letter, more urgent in tone, warned of external influence clouding the throne's integrity. The Queen did not name names, but her meaning was clear. She had seen the winds shift long before the storm arrived, and now her daughter held the map. But it wasn't just letters. Within the vault were classified guidelines, protocols for safeguarding the Crown's core during times of instability, hidden instructions for securing state archives, redirecting internal channels, and isolating disruptive forces without triggering scandal. It was a masterclass in silent power, and the most devastating discovery came in the form of a lineage map, one drafted by Elizabeth herself, highlighting roles, transitions, and future titles. It bore no reference to Camilla, not even once. One staffer who escorted Anne to the vault later confided that she emerged visibly shaken, not with fear but with purpose. Her silence was not numbness, it was control. Something inside her had shifted. The passive loyalty was gone. In its place stood a woman who now saw her role not as supportive, but essential. She hadn't merely inherited access, she had inherited intent. The Queen had spoken, not through public proclamation, but through meticulously guarded foresight. Anne was never meant to sit quietly. She was meant to act, and act she would, because what she now possessed wasn't just family history, it was sovereign ammunition. The final confirmations she needed, the blueprints for realignment, the clarity to move without hesitation. She had the truth, the proof, and the blessing of the only monarch she had ever truly followed. It was no longer about protecting tradition. It was about protecting what that tradition once stood for. Armed with the truth and emboldened by legacy, Anne stepped out of the vault with more than knowledge. She now carried the Queen's unspoken will. Not since the days of the abdication crisis has the monarchy activated a strategy so discreet, so pointed, and so explosive. Dubbed Operation Sovereign Wall, insiders claim it was a William Anne initiative designed to neutralize Camilla's reach without ever naming her publicly. It began quietly. Names started disappearing from Camilla's private staff list. Longtime aides were informed they'd been reassigned, though no roles were officially posted. One by one, loyalists found themselves removed from key corridors of influence. No formal dismissals, no accusations, just locked-out logins and curt HR briefings. Within days, the Queen Consort's once tight circle looked unrecognizable. And the message was unmistakable. Her presence was being peeled away, layer by layer, and the hands doing the peeling were steady and silent. This wasn't reaction. This was design. Princess Anne, armed with knowledge from the vault and fueled by Queen Elizabeth's unspoken will, began reshaping the landscape beneath Camilla's feet. Invitations to diplomatic functions were drafted with surgical precision, and for the first time in years, the guest lists made no room for Camilla's relatives. Events Anne once overlooked, she now presided over. And her guest of honor? The Crown, not Camilla. She didn't have to name the exclusion. The silence did it for her. Meanwhile, funding allocated to Camilla's personal patronages began to thin. Budgets that once flowed easily from royal reserves were quietly rerouted, redirected to causes Anne personally endorsed or Catherine was preparing to adopt. Nothing illegal, nothing headline-worthy, but devastatingly effective. The institutions that propped up Camilla's public profile were being starved politely, surgically, without confrontation. Behind the scenes, William moved with equal precision. Legal teams, normally focused on ceremonial law, were instructed to revisit succession frameworks. Advisors were ordered to explore worst-case transitions and alternate delegation paths, subtle shifts that could redefine power without ever sparking constitutional panic. No one dared utter the phrase early abdication, but the air hung thick with implication. Every memo, every clause reviewed, every contingency documented, pointed to one unsettling truth. They were preparing for something Camilla was never meant to be part of. Even her visibility, once her strongest weapon, was dulled. Her media team, once robust and connected, found themselves blocked from key palace press channels. Statements went unpublished. Interview requests were denied. The royal press office gave no explanations, and in what may be the most cutting move of all, a new photo strategy was reportedly commissioned. For the first time in a decade, next year's official images were said to exclude Camilla entirely. No solo portraits, no shared appearances with the king. The narrative was shifting, and she was being written out. What made Operation Sovereign Wall so terrifying wasn't the force, it was the finesse. No leaks, no shouting, no spectacle. Just steady erasure, executed from within. It was a campaign not of war, but of silence. And Camilla, once convinced of her invincibility, was beginning to feel its grip. As Camilla began to feel the walls closing in, she turned to the one man she believed would protect her, only to be met with devastating silence. She expected resistance. She even braced for political maneuvering. But what Camilla didn't anticipate was silence from the one voice she needed most. King Charles's refusal to act left her shattered, according to insiders, and her tears reportedly echoed through Clarence House. For a woman who had weathered decades of public scrutiny and private wars, Camilla had learned to anticipate confrontation. She was no stranger to criticism, nor to quiet sabotage, but nothing could have prepared her for the void that met her in her hour of need. When whispers of Operation Sovereign Wall reached her ears, when staff vanished, funding dried up, and she was ghosted by rooms she used to command, Camilla did what she had always done. She went straight to Charles. But this time, the door didn't open. According to palace insiders, she requested an urgent audience with the king not once, but 3 times. Each time, the meeting was delayed, postponed, quietly swept to the end of the schedule until it disappeared entirely. That silence became unbearable. One of her longest-serving aides, who had seen her rise from scandal to crown, revealed that Camilla broke down in private, uncontrolled, sobbing, words slipping into whispers no one could understand. It wasn't rage, it was grief. Grief for a role she thought she'd secured. Grief for a husband who suddenly couldn't or wouldn't stand by her. That aide, unable to bear the sight, resigned within the week, not out of protest but heartbreak. In private conversations, Charles was reportedly torn. One friend claims he confided, "It's gone too far, I can't save her now." Whether that statement was guilt or resignation, no one can say. But the impact was clear. Camilla, once the centerpiece of royal engagements, began cancelling appearances without explanation. Her name vanished from event programs. Her team offered vague health reasons, but insiders knew better. She wasn't sick, she was unraveling. Leaked messages from close associates suggested she even considered a temporary move to Sandringham, a place far from the capital, and even farther from the eyes, watching every moment of her unraveling. It was meant to be a reprieve, a retreat. But to those inside the palace, it felt like an exile in motion. All the while, speculation surged that Charles's hands were not entirely his own. Royal legal advisors, fearing constitutional blowback and public backlash, reportedly pressured him to remain neutral. Not to interfere, not to act in ways that could imply favoritism toward a consort under scrutiny. Their arguments were simple, yet devastating. The monarchy cannot protect personal interests at the cost of public faith. And so, he stayed still. But Camilla didn't need neutrality. She needed defense. And when none came, when the silence hardened into a wall she could no longer climb, she broke. The Queen Consort had been written out of meetings, erased from photos, blocked from funds, but nothing stung more than being abandoned by the man she thought would shield her from it all. But while Camilla receded into silence, William and Anne made their boldest move, yet one that would stun the monarchy and the nation. The rumors were true. In a move that shattered protocol and stunned even seasoned royals, Princess Anne was appointed lead delegate to the Privy Council, traditionally overseen by the sovereign or their direct heir. The transfer, signed at midnight, was now official and irreversible. The document, bearing both royal insignia and the sealed crest of state, did not come through traditional channels. It was hand-delivered, its contents marked for limited distribution, and what it revealed sent tremors through the palace hierarchy. Princess Anne, once the silent sentinel of the crown, was now titled Privy Liaison and Strategic Oversight, a designation never before granted to a female royal, and certainly never to one not seated directly in the line of succession. But that was the point. This wasn't a ceremonial nod. This was a strategic strike, calculated, deliberate, and profoundly symbolic. The first signature was unmistakable: Prince William. Bold, unwavering, it declared loyalty not only to his aunt, but to the realignment they had engineered together. Charles's seal, affixed last, appeared almost reluctant, an echo of a monarch cornered by consequence, compelled to acknowledge the shift in power even as it slipped from his grasp. And yet, with his seal pressed onto parchment, the transformation became law. It could no longer be debated. Anne now held the reins to one of the most influential councils in British constitutional tradition. Witnesses at the midnight chamber signing said Anne emerged not triumphant but resolved. A subtle smile marked her lips not of pride but of understanding. This was not an accolade, it was a responsibility. And it had been given, not gifted. For years, she had operated in the shadows of duty, fulfilling her role while others claimed the spotlight. But now, with royal trust shaken and institutional balance collapsing, she had been called forward not as a relic of the past, but as a guardian of the future. The Prime Minister had allegedly been briefed 2 days prior, a move signalling that this was not simply an internal shift, but a national one. No press release followed, no address from the throne. The silence was intentional, the symbolism unmistakable. And yet, what echoed louder than anything was who was not there: Camilla. Her absence at the subsequent state gathering was jarring. For someone once front and center in every royal function, her sudden vanishing spoke volumes. No acknowledgement, no statement, just a conspicuous vacancy beside the king where the queen consort once stood. And so, Anne stood instead, not beside him, but ahead of him. The nation watched as the Princess Royal, in an unprecedented position, stepped into a role forged through quiet strength, unwavering loyalty, and inherited legacy. The council chamber had changed. The balance of power had shifted, and the monarchy, once resistant to such deviation, now bore her imprint. But even in victory, Princess Anne knew this wasn't the end, because power never disappears quietly, and somewhere in the silence, another storm was already brewing. With Camilla sidelined, Charles cornered, and Anne rising in power, the monarchy stands on a precipice. But palace insiders warn, the crown is never truly safe. As factions realign and secrets deepen, one question now defines the future: who really holds the throne? In the wake of Anne's unprecedented elevation and Camilla's quiet retreat, the royal landscape has shifted into unfamiliar, dangerous territory. No longer bound by tradition alone, power is now being brokered in whispers and actions taken behind polished doors. According to well-placed insiders, a second transfer is already in quiet motion, this time with Catherine, the Princess of Wales, at its centre. Far from ceremonial, this strategic alignment would place her in the core of long-term planning for the future face of the monarchy. Those who once saw her as merely a supportive consort are now recognizing something far more consequential. Catherine is being positioned as the monarchy's stabilizing pillar, and while Anne's rise has redrawn the map of influence, it's not gone unnoticed that her reach now exceeds even that of Camilla's peak. She is present where Camilla once presided. She is consulted where others are briefed. It is a shift not just in seniority, but in substance. Yet with every move forward comes a wave of consequences. Sources close to the palace suggest King Charles may soon face a public reckoning not for actions, but for his continued indecision. His failure to respond to Camilla's isolation, his hesitation to intervene in William's midnight directive, and his silence as Anne stepped into constitutional territory once exclusive to the throne, all of it is now drawing scrutiny. Meanwhile, Camilla's allies in the press, though momentarily subdued, are reportedly preparing their counterstrike. Tabloid editors with long-standing loyalty to her inner circle have been briefed. The plan? A media campaign to reframe the narrative, paint Camilla as a scapegoat, and redirect public sympathy her way. But the palace is not standing still. Prince William has reportedly doubled security around key royal archives and restricted access to communications within internal legal channels. A move that suggests one thing: he expects a fight. And perhaps he's right to. Because what's unfolding now isn't merely a power transition, it's a palace Cold War. One side moving with caution, the other with desperation. With Anne securing legacy and Catherine emerging as the crown's modern anchor, the monarchy faces a rebirth unlike anything in recent memory. But rebirth is never clean. It is forged in rupture, in silence, in sleepless nights behind palace doors. What looms ahead isn't just transition, it's confrontation. What lies ahead is a monarchy transformed, driven not by tradition, but by confrontation, clarity, and the cold steel of those who refuse to be silenced. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.